Um, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Falls Free Friday on this wonderful September 8th of 2023. My name is Elizabeth Head. I'm the Deputy Director for Injury Prevention at the Georgia Department of Public Health. And in partnership with our wonderful friends at the Injury Prevention Research Center at Emory, with Shepherd Center, with the Falls Prevention Task Force, that is co-facilitated between Department of Public Health and iPrice. We are really thrilled to welcome you to this 2023 Falls Free Friday session. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to be able to present these to you every single Friday in September. Feel free to go to the iPrice website for more information on which sessions are on which Fridays. Our speaker today is Rachel Burton. She's a community dietitian with Open Hand Atlanta, which is a community-based organization that provides meals and nutrition education to neighbors in need. At Open Hand, Rachel provides individual nutrition counseling and group education to older adults across the state of Georgia. Her favorite part about working with the older adult population is the diverse life experiences that are shared with her and how they can be used as motivation to make lifestyle changes for living a healthier life. When she's not working, Rachel loves having a large cup of coffee and curling up with a good book. She also loves spending time with friends, family, and her cat, Kaya. I think I pronounced that wrong, Rachel. Rachel, I'm going to turn it. Did I do it? Great. I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. We're so excited to hear what you have to say about nutrition today.
Great. Thank you for having me today. Let me just take a second, get my screen up here. All right. Looks good. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, thank you so much. Like Liz mentioned, my name's Rachel and I work for Open Hand Atlanta. And so thank you so much for having me present today on nutrition and falls prevention. So I am a registered dietitian for Open Hand Atlanta. So again, a nonprofit that provides food and nutrition services for our neighbors in need, not only in Metro Atlanta, but across the state. I'm also a board certified specialist in gerontological nutrition. And so when it comes to my food philosophy, I'd just like to share, I just believe that we should all have peace with our food and use food and the power that it can have for us to live our lives as the fullest as possible. So just a quick disclaimer here. This webinar and content is not for individual purposes. It's more just for general, nutrition advice and should not be considered as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. And so again, not intended to cure, diagnose, treat, or prevent any disease. All right, so jumping into nutrition for falls prevention. So we've got a few different learning objectives today. So first we'll talk about how nutrition is connected to fall risk. We'll talk about nutrition recommendations to prevent falls, but then also how to help loved ones follow these recommendations as well if we are caregivers or live with somebody who is at risk for falls. All right, so first, just to start off, just talking about what a therapeutic diet is. I'm curious if anybody is familiar with the term therapeutic diets, or any questions, or anybody has anything that they'd like to share, has any particular interest that they'd like to discuss. Feel free to drop it in the chat, and then we can make sure to hit that at the end. But just wanting to share this little graphic here. It says, don't slice the pizza. My diet says I'm only allowed to eat one piece. I just think, these are little funny comic strips. And so just wanting to start it off with a bit of a chuckle. All right. So when it comes to nutrition connection to falls, so nutrition has been shown to be a big determining factor for lots of different aspects of our health, as we might know, but especially when it comes to that fall risk. And the severity of injuries from falls, and then also the amount of time it can take to recover after a fall as well. And so eating, as good as best as we can and staying fit is always going to be important at any stage of our lives. And as we know, and as we get older, our bodies have different needs and different requirements. And so certain nutrients become especially important for, overall health. So just some nutrients that we want to consider generally in our everyday eating. First we have is our calcium and our vitamin D. And so older adults need more calcium and vitamin D to help maintain our bone health. And so to meet these needs, we want to make sure we're selecting calcium-rich foods and beverages and aim for 3 servings of low-fat or fat-free dairy each day. Other sources of calcium, if we can't tolerate dairy, can include fortified cereals and fruit juices, dark leafy green vegetables, canned fish with soft bones, and fortified plant beverages. And when it comes to vitamin D, food sources for this include our fatty cold water fish, such as salmon or trout, eggs, especially those egg yolks, again, those fortified foods and beverages as well. You can even sometimes take a calcium supplement or a multivitamin if this is more of interest to you. And what we want to just make sure is that we're choosing ones that contain both that calcium and vitamin D. Our next one when it comes to vitamin B12. So some adults that are older than the age of 50 may not be able to absorb vitamin B12 just as a part of the natural aging process. So really wanting to choose foods that, again, are fortified with vitamin B12, including our fortified cereals and other kind of those starchy, stable products. This also includes our lean meat, and some fish and seafood are great sources for vitamin B12. And this is something to make sure we're talking to our healthcare provider or a registered dietitian about, as some people do end up needing an additional vitamin B12 supplement. So when it comes to dietary fiber as well, we want to make sure we're eating those fiber-rich foods to stay regular. It helps our blood sugar, and it also can improve our heart health. And so again, this can decrease our risk for heart disease and also type 2 diabetes. And so we want to make sure we're choosing our whole grain breads and cereals, choosing more beans and peas, legumes, things of that nature. And then along with fruits and vegetables can also provide some great amounts of dietary fiber. When it comes to our potassium, so consuming enough potassium throughout the day, along with limiting our salt or our sodium intake, can help reduce the risk of high blood pressure. So these will be great sources for potassium are usually your fruits, your vegetables, again, beans, and those dairy products as well. We also want to try and select or prepare foods that have little to no added salt. So maybe this means lower sodium packaged items or limiting how much salt you're adding to your dishes. And instead, maybe adding flavor to food using herbs, spices, citrus, marinades, things of that nature. And then lastly, we have our heart healthy fats. So knowing which fats can be great for our heart. Most of these fats we want to focus on are polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, which are primarily found in our nuts, seeds, avocados, vegetable oils or plant oils, and then also our fish. We also want to make sure we're choosing foods that are low in saturated fat and trans fat, which, as a reference that I like to use, are typically fats that are solid at room temperature. So this is typically our butter, our full fat dairy, lard, the marbling and red meat, for example. These are shown to perhaps that can increase our risk for heart disease. So watching foods that are low in saturated fat and choosing, again, those unsaturated fats, usually typically liquid at room temperature, to help make sure our heart health stays strong. All right, so lots of different nutrients to consider, of course, but just wanting to focus again on that falls piece, right? So wanting to just share the main reference for this is going to be literature review from a 2018 study conducted by 2 registered dietitians with the intention to determine nutrition status association with falls risk. So in this research, they found three key factors that we'll talk about today specifically. So we'll talk about malnutrition and sarcopenia and what those are. We'll talk about vitamin D deficiency, and lastly, dehydration. And all of these efforts to address these factors are shown to reduce our falls. All right. So when it comes to our first one, we have our malnutrition and sarcopenia. So malnutrition is considered a deficiency, excess, or imbalance in a person's intake of energy and or nutrients. And so when malnutrition occurs, there is a negative nitrogen balance when nitrogen excretion is bigger than nitrogen intake. So why this is important is that amino acids or protein they're made of nitrogen. And if we are lacking nitrogen, the essential amino acids in our body are degraded or lost. So this can really impact our strength, our muscle mass, and just our overall function, and also, again, increase that fall risk. And so the normal aging process is, it's very normal to lose muscle mass, even if we are maintaining the same weight. So we might not notice necessarily any changes in how our body is structured, but we are losing muscle mass as time goes on. And so after the age of 70, there's approximately 15% of muscle loss per decade. So here we've got a picture of a thigh muscle, and on the left side, we have the muscle of an average healthy adult, an active 25-year-old, against maybe a 75-year-old with maybe a bit more of a sedentary lifestyle. And when we are, when it's the same height and weight for both, typically the 75-year-old, this right side, will have considerably less muscle. And so the muscle is, again, this sort of the red picture, part of the picture here. And so this is, again, like that natural process is called sarcopenia. And so as people age, naturally losing muscle mass faster. Whenever there's a period of inactivity, such as a hospitalization, bed rest, just needing to stay off beat, and it is possible to lose about 10% of leg muscle mass after 10 days of inactivity, even if we are eating adequate amounts of protein. And so again, this loss of muscle mass is a big predictor of our overall health status and fall risk. And so muscle loss is often, leads to diminished strength and decreased levels of activity, which can contribute to our mobility issues, osteoporosis or low bone density, frailty, and then also loss of physical function and independence. So these two typically go hand in hand. And so just wanting to again point out that the weight loss associated with sarcopenia, that loss of muscle, may be a greater risk factor for falls than lower body weight alone. So meaning, maybe somebody is at a lower body weight or a higher body weight, but again, just how much muscle is present is a bigger indicator for that fall risk. So again, really focusing on our muscle mass here. So we have, again, picture on the left is the healthy thigh muscle, the lighter part. But as time goes on, we might notice having less muscle mass, sarcopenia, even if it is the same size. All right, so our next factor is vitamin D. And so vitamin D plays an important role in lots of different parts of our health, but especially when it comes to regulation of the minerals calcium and phosphorus metabolism. And these are really a big contributor to our bone health. So it has been shown that vitamin D, consumption can reduce the risk of falls just because of the sheer help it has with our bone health. It was also studied that deficiency of vitamin D impairs muscle strength and possible neuromuscular function as well. So it is, it's considered that if we can correct this deficiency, it may reduce in fall risk. So typically, lots of folks can be vitamin D deficient. And so usually a standard recommendation for supplementing is this comes up quite a bit, is about 400 IU or international units per day. And so lots of times we do see beneficial supplementation in the older adult population over 60. And so just some considerations when it does come to supplementation and that vitamin D deficiency. Some of it was a bit conflicting in saying that some studies suggested that vitamin D supplementation only reduces fall risk for people who are at risk for vitamin D deficiency. Other studies concluded that vitamin D only decreases fall risk when taken with calcium. Again, calcium and vitamin D sort of go hand in hand here. So sometimes it can get a bit convoluted and tricky. But if we're working with a healthcare provider and supplementation is recommended, you should be appropriately monitored, and it is, that's an important piece of all of this. All right, next we have dehydration. So dehydration has a very strong association to fall risk. So dehydration can happen for lots of different reasons. This could be related to reduced kidney function or renal function, increased plasma vasopressin, decreased response to ADH or antidiuretic hormone, which helps our body recognize when we need to urinate. Can also be contributing to diuretic use for maybe high blood pressure or heart disease. Comorbidities, very common, that can cause dehydration over time. If we experience dysphagia or trouble with swallowing or chewing, sometimes we may need thickened liquids to make sure we can prevent aspiration. However, those thickened liquids can make it challenging to get enough hydration as well. If we're experiencing cognitive impairment, we may forget to drink or refuse to drink. And then also we just over time have a decreased sense of thirst. So our bodies don't really recognize when we're feeling thirsty, or it may be past the point of that, we may be dehydrated by then. And so really there's lots of different reasons why we can get dehydrated, even, hot weather and things of that nature. So it's really, really, really crucial to look out for the signs and symptoms related to dehydration. So this can be feeling dizzy if we're going from sitting to standing or standing to sitting. It could be feeling, that sense of thirst. That typically means it can be urgent. If we have dry mouth, fatigue, or if we're excessively sweating, these can all be, some red flags and to think about that we may be experiencing dehydration. All right, so between malnutrition, sarcopenia, vitamin D deficiency, and dehydration, we really want to find out ways that we can prevent all these things from happening. So really wanting to just focus more on those, applicable ways that we can prevent all these things from happening. So preventing malnutrition and sarcopenia. So what we want to do first and foremost is make sure that we are consuming adequate high quality protein. So protein requirements for the standard adult is going to be less than the amount that older adults need. So older adults typically need about 1 to 1.2 grams per kilograms per day of protein. And this is due to increased anabolic resistance and elevated metabolism for inflammatory conditions, meaning heart failure, COPD, diabetes management, chronic disease management overall. So typically older adults need more protein overall. So, but this can, again, this is general. This can change depending on what, acute or chronic conditions we are managing. So again, important, to work with the healthcare provider on how much protein you need. Another thing that we want to make sure we're doing is making sure we're taking part in resistance training. This can be very, very helpful to reverse the results of, poor muscle mass or decreased strength. This can be really great to add into our, movement routines to make sure that we are, again, maintaining our muscle mass. So making sure we're partaking in resistance training 2 to 3 times per week, roughly, in addition to our endurance exercises. So typically our cardiovascular exercise. So using our machines, free weights, resistance bands, even body weights. So things like push-ups or squats, planks, hip lifts, dips. And so these are just some of the numerous, equipment-free resistance training options we could consider. We also can try yoga or Tai Chi to build muscle, and by using our body weight while also improving our flexibility and balance as well. And always making sure that we are, consulting with professionals. We do not want to get injured, and we need to stay safe, of course. So again, making sure we're exercising and moving in a safe way. So again, just looking back at some of the recommendations here. So when it comes to making sure we're getting that adequate protein in each day, really what I like to have as a simple goal is to make sure that we are having a source of protein with each meal and snack. So say, for example, instead of choosing just a food that's a carbohydrate, so typically more of our starchier foods or fruits, we really want to make sure we're pairing that carbohydrate with a protein source. Again, to help our muscle mass, it also helps us stay fuller for longer. So some snacks that we can consider during the day can be, instead of maybe an apple, maybe try an apple with peanut butter, add that protein in. We can also have, instead of crackers, trying to do crackers with cheese or tuna on them. Or even if we do whole grain toast and then a chicken salad. Just again, how can we get our snack to go a little bit further, include that protein, help us feel full, help us stay strong. And then again, when it comes to those resistance trainings, and we can of course do, those weight-free options maybe at home, but we can also look at videos, many free online videos, maybe on YouTube, for example. There's also lots of in-person classes if that's more preferred at, local YMCAs, senior centers, libraries, and places kind of gathering or communal space. So again, going back to that nutrition piece, just wanting to have an example of how we can make sure we get enough protein in each day. So again, remember that it's recommended that those 65 and older generally get about 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of protein each day. And so I don't really function much in grams per kilogram. So just for a quick example here of what that means, for an example. So for example, we've got maybe a 150-pound person. And so to get the amount of kilograms, that will be, you want to divide the pounds by 2.2 to get that into the amount of kilograms. And then, so if you are going for about 1 gram per kilogram for protein, we just multiply that 1 gram times our body weight in kilograms. So 1 times 68 will be 68 grams of protein per day, about. If you were more wanting to do more protein, so say 1.2, you would just multiply that 68 kilograms by 1.2, and then that will give you kind of that range, for example. So there's a couple different ways that we can gauge this throughout the day. So one way that we can consider this is if you're somebody who likes to do meal planning or have like a plan for the week or the day, what we can do is sort of lay it out, for example, here, and really make sure we're identifying what those sources of protein are. So for example, we've got our breakfast, and we've got maybe a 2-egg omelet with vegetables, 1 slice of wheat toast, and then 8 ounces of milk. So that can be a good way to really gauge, okay, this is how much protein I'm getting in each, or I'm getting where I'm getting my sources of protein. So another way that we can do this, and if you kind of, don't plan meals or a day in advance or a week in advance, what we can also do is follow what's called the plate method. And so for the plate method, this is just a great way to make sure we're getting that balanced eating pattern at each meal, and then you can incorporate snacks as well. So for the plate method, typically we want to aim for about our standard dinner plate, so about 9 inches. But we want that half of our plate to be non-starchy vegetables. And so this includes our leafy greens, our tomatoes, broccoli, peppers, things of that nature. It also includes any, canned vegetables, preferably the low salt or no salt added. And so, we want to get about half of our plate as those non-starchy vegetables. The next quarter of our plate we want is our carbohydrates. So these will be our starchier foods, fiber-rich foods. So usually this could be our fruit, starchier veggies like corn or beans even, potatoes, squash, rice, yams, sweet potatoes, things like that. And then the last quarter of our plate, what I really want to hit home on is that protein source. So just making sure we're getting in about a quarter-ish of our plate's worth of protein in at each meal. So this can include our animal sources, such as our meats, such as our red meats or our poultry like chicken or turkey. This can include our seafood or shellfish even. But it can also be our plant-based foods, such as soy products like tofu or tempeh, beans, even eggs, even though that's a plant or an animal source. So lots of different ways that we can incorporate protein as well. All right. So when it comes to preventing vitamin D deficiency, we want to focus on 3 different areas to assure adequate vitamin D intake. So the first one being our dietary intake, or what we're eating. So focusing again on those fatty cold water fish, our egg yolks, and then our foods fortified with vitamin D, such as milk. And so we can really, companies do a great job of labeling when there is a product that is fortified with vitamin D, and that can be a helpful indicator to make sure, like, okay, I am getting that vitamin D. However, we can't get vitamin D just from the foods that we eat. So we have to look for other sources. And one we might think of first before food for vitamin D is that sunshine. And so those with darker skin may need more time in the sun. So maybe more on that 30-minute side, but typically ranging from about 10 to 30 minutes per day. But again, making sure we're taking part in sun protection, as we want to make sure we're preventing any skin concerns, and then again, that dehydration prevention as well. And then last, we have that supplementation, as we mentioned before. So again, consulting with the healthcare provider consistently for checking levels of vitamin D, making sure we're not getting deficient, and then as needed, using supplements that can be available over the counter. And so again, just making sure we're looking at those, and we're choosing ones that are reputable and whatnot as well. And so just one way that I would prefer to get vitamin D, sometimes these foods can be a bit on the pricier side, but one way that I like to get more vitamin D and on a budget can be to add the canned fatty fish. So such as canned tuna, for example, to my meals and snacks if possible. So one snack that I like to partake in a lot is oftentimes typically putting a canned tuna or canned salmon, mixing it with some yogurt and adding some seasonings and whatnot, and then spreading that mixture on crackers. Not only does this get us our protein, it can get us our calcium from the bones, but also that vitamin D as well. And then it gets, that can help keep us full. And then also is a pretty good bang for our buck when it comes to getting that protein, vitamin D, and calcium. Another thing that we can do to get vitamin D from sunshine is scheduling walks outdoors or spending quality time with others in the sunshine to make sure we're getting that adequate vitamin D exposure as well. And we can even go in the mornings, we can go in the evenings outside, if the middle of the day is too hot, that doesn't typically matter as much. So when it comes to ways to sneak in additional hydration, what we can do is investing in a fun water bottle to help us remember to drink more often. If you're anything like me, I often forget to drink water if it's not in front of me, or if I, don't think about it, out of sight, out of mind, and whatnot. What we can also do is try and find new recipes to incorporate new soups and stews, as these are great ways to get more hydration. Same with using gravies, for example, as well. Other things that we can do are slice vegetables and fruits and have them just ready to eat. And that way, because that way we can get in that additional hydration as well, as fruits and vegetables have a pretty decent water content in them and can be a good way to stay hydrated, even if it doesn't feel like even if you're not, literally drinking something. So when it comes to hydration, we ideally want to aim for about 64 ounces of fluids per day. This could be different depending, again, on each person and what, maybe what season it is or what we're experiencing, but usually generally about 64 ounces of fluids per day. And again, some ways that we can do this are adding fluids to our diets. Again, those high water fruits, vegetables, such as our strawberries or our citrus, watermelon, cucumbers, any sort of fruits or vegetables. And keeping water exciting. Typically, preferably that non-sweetened variety, but maybe making infused waters, or adding maybe a bit of juice to it, just to give it some flavor. Sometimes flat water, regular water can be not as exciting or enticing to drink. So finding ways to make it more exciting for yourself to consume. Other things we can do are make sure like we keep fluids available. So maybe keeping a pitcher of cold water in the refrigerator, or again, having fluids visible with maybe that fun water bottle, or even setting reminders for regular consumption of drinking something throughout the day as well. All right, so with that being said, just wanting to hit home that there are so many factors that impact our nutrition status, right? It's not just what we eat when we eat. Lots of things such as our age, our access to food, social isolation, oral health, medications, dependency or disability, disease management, income status, our environment, and the support around us. There's lots of these are out of our control. And so really just wanting to hit home that nutrition is only going to be one piece of this puzzle when it comes to our overall health. So really keep that in mind when we're setting goals, as sometimes I notice a lot is an all or nothing mentality when it comes to nutrition goals. And just know that there's lots of different aspects that come into nutrition and in our health. And so just keep those in mind when we are setting goals, making sure that they're attainable, realistic, and something that we can actually achieve as well. So again, working with a dietitian or a healthcare provider that understands you, your situation, can be a great place to start here. All right, so if we're somebody who is a caregiver or a family member or loved one that's caring for somebody that is at risk for falling, some things that we want to think about when it comes to our nutrition status overall. One can be, are they getting enough to eat in quantity or in frequency even? Are we spreading out our intake throughout the day? Is it going to be enough? Does it seem like it's enough to eat and drink? Are we eating nutrient dense foods? So we want to make sure we're getting those additional vitamins, minerals, fiber, protein from our foods. Do we have any change in appetite? Maybe we were having, good meals, good sized meals, but then maybe something's changed. Are we noticing any change in our appetite? Are there any challenges with chewing, swallowing? So do we notice if somebody is kind of coughing or gurgling after chewing or swallowing a bite of food? Do we notice if there's any pocketing or drooling going on? Those can be indicators for chewing and swallowing concerns, and to get those checked out if we can. If there are dentures present, do they fit appropriately? Are they too big, or do they cause pain? That could be a big indicator as well of maybe not getting enough to eat, or not eating or drinking frequently. And then lastly, are they able to eat independently? Maybe we can eat independently, but maybe we're not, maybe we tire out, or need some additional assistance. We just need that little bit of an assistance that can help make sure we get that adequate intake. So just some things to keep in mind for some big flags for nutrition issues. So some other things to consider can be, if this is appropriate, talk to the person about their needs, again, if appropriate. How do they feel about their nutrition status? Do they know that these interventions can exist to try and improve our nutrition status overall? And if so, how can we work together to achieve, that goal? Making sure we're getting connected to resources for shopping, cooking, oral care, eating assistance if needed. And then that way can help sort of ease some of those nutrition concerns as well. And then lastly, we can always try and get connected to that healthcare provider or dietitian if needed for those further concerns and assistance, maybe on those specific interventions as well. All right, so just to kind of wrap up here, just some three main takeaways for preventing falls. One is watching or concerns for malnutrition and sarcopenia. So when it comes to malnutrition and sarcopenia, making sure we're getting that adequate protein, sneaking in protein at each meal and snack, and then also taking part in that resistance training as well. So again, this can be body weights, this could be free weights, resistance bands, maybe filling up even some water bottles and using those, or bags of rice, for example, or flour. Those can all be great ways to help with our resistance training. For vitamin D deficiency, remember, we have those three categories. So getting enough foods that are high in both that vitamin D and calcium. And we need to also make sure we're getting that sun exposure. And then also talking to a healthcare provider if you are somebody who does maybe need to consider supplementation if needed. And then for dehydration, ensuring adequate fluid throughout the day. Again, maybe setting reminders, making that water bottle or that pitcher of water present, and kind of carry it with you throughout the day to make sure we're getting that fluid. We can also make sure we're using fluids in cooking. So again, soups, stews, gravies can be great ways to sneak in some additional fluid. And then also, again, keeping water exciting. Maybe this means adding fruits, maybe making smoothies, maybe adding some juice or some popsicles made of like orange juice or apple juice, for example. And then that way we can have it cold, but also give it a bit of a sweetness. So again, finding ways to make water exciting there as well. And then I just wanted to point out here just some additional nutrition programs that are available throughout the state. So there are congregate meals available at senior centers and then other places as well. And then also available are home delivered meals, not only through Open Hand Atlanta, but in other circumstances as well. So these can be great ways, again, if, food preparation or, cooking is a challenge, this can be a great way to still make sure we're getting that adequate nutrition in. And then that way you don't have to prepare the meal or really do anything besides heat it up or have it served. If you are interested in either of these programs or learning more or getting connected, you can always make sure to contact the Aging and Disability Resource Connection. And also there are evidence-based wellness programs available at georgiahealthmatters.org. These are typically going to be, how setting goals, chronic disease management workshops, self-management workshops, things of that nature, just to kind of learn more about how we can sort of set those realistic goals again and that are related to our health. Okay. So here I have a list of our references used. But other than that, I will open it up for questions. I have my information available, but also if always checking out openhandatlanta.org to also get more information on our services in the metro area as well.
Rachel, thank you so much for your presentation. You think you know a little bit about nutrition, and then you come in and you do such an amazing job of presenting some pretty complex things in a way that makes sense. Selfishly, I have a question, so I'm going to start, and then folks, please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, or also just feel free to unmute and you can do a question if you want. You talked a little bit about muscle loss earlier. Once a person loses muscle loss, loses muscle mass, excuse me, is it possible to get it back?
Yes, so it is, as you know, we will never have the same muscle mass as we do when we're 20 years old, 25 years old. But yes, it is possible to maintain. You may lose some, but it is, possible to again, yeah, maintain and get some of that back. Again, you maybe not notice it, but again, just partaking in that resistance training can be just a good way to help make sure we're not losing more than we already naturally are, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you for that. Other questions for our fabulous presenter?
I have one for you. I know you gave several suggestions for kind of sneaking in extra nutrition or helping with keeping yourself hydrated. But do you have any specific suggestions for somebody who potentially has an Alzheimer's or related dementia? My grandma specifically has Alzheimer's, and she is a tough one to get eating her meals, with the exception of like ice cream and like sweets.
Yeah, that's a very valid concern. I hear about this one a lot as well. Yeah, so definitely, seizing where those opportunities are. If that is ice cream, sweets, by all means, we want to make sure that does provide some of those calories, protein, water, hydration, all that good stuff. One can be, if really honing in on kind of what those flavor preferences are. So if it is sweet, so how can we maybe kind of find those liquid or sweeter options. So lots of time my brain goes to like a protein shake, like Ensure Boost, or any, generic brands like that. How can we just make it more enticing on what those preferences are in the moment? So it can be tricky, but and also what can be what we can consider too is consistent offering, consistent encouragement, or even just can you take a little sip for me now, or with medications and whatnot as well. So I would say kind of honing in on preferences, and just depending on what those are can be, we can go lots of different directions, but also again, just that consistent offering.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
I love that. Other questions for Rachel today? All right. Rachel, thank you so much for your time and expertise. We are so pleased to be able to have you today. This concludes our Falls Free Friday session for September 8th. I believe we will have 2 Falls Free Friday sessions next week, one at 10 a.m. and Megan Passano, help me out, one at 1 p.m.?
Yeah, second one at 1 p.m. Yep.
Okay. It's slightly different topics and audiences, but anyone is welcome. So we hope to see you next Friday, and stay safe. Try to avoid falls and really just take care of yourselves and be kind. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.